Hi everyone, welcome to Red Dog Gamer. Today I've got a special for you where I'm going to be covering the top 10 tips to help you on your quest for managerial greatness on Football Manager 2022. So are the board on your back? Are the fans giving you stick? Are the players moaning like 5-year-old children? All of that stuff can really get you down when playing Football Manager. But these short little tips today that I'm going to give you will help you to resolve all those problems and make all your stress go away. So with that said, let's get into the top 10 tips to help you on your quest for managerial greatness. So tip number 1, optional future transfer fee. So when loaning players on Football Manager, a lot of the time clubs will say that they want a mandatory transfer fee as part of the loan deal, particularly if you're loaning a player for a full season. I've learned of a little trick playing Football Manager where you can actually change the mandatory transfer fee for an optional one when loaning the player. What this does is it allows you to sign the player for the season without the pressure of having to fork out an hefty transfer fee, or if you are a club that's got a minimal budget, you can put that loan offer in. The club might say that they want a mandatory transfer fee at the end of the loan deal. You just go in, change that to optional. The fee stays the same, but as far as I've experienced, 9 times out of 10, that will be accepted very much in the same way as if it was the mandatory option to buy. So that's my first tip, and a really good one as well, particularly if you've got a player that you really want to bring in, but you can't afford that hefty transfer fee. Numero dos, tactical consistency. In Football Manager, a big thing is made out of tactics, and for a good reason. It tries to simulate real world football, and with real world football, if a manager is tinkering and changing the team every 5 minutes, there'll be no consistency, the players will struggle to follow out simple instructions, and invariably the team will get beat. In Football Manager 2022, what I would recommend is to try and settle into a system or a tactic. If it doesn't work straight away, don't panic. It's important that you get a good run of games using that system before they actually start to gel and get used to it, before you'll actually see the fruits of your labour and you'll start to get results on the pitch. That brings me on to tip number 3, and this one is a really good one, particularly for picking up bargains and also for picking up cracking regen players, and it is to look in other continents when searching for available players. On a recent go I had with Nottingham Forest, I managed to pick up a left back from Brazil, and his attributes were fantastic, but he didn't cost me that much. I think if you're looking sort of in the Premier League or in the really sort of well-known divisions, you're going to be paying a premium for each player. If you go to the other continents, you can pick up cheap bargains, and there's quite a lot of them as well. And straight away when you sign them, the value just goes through the roof. So definitely check out them other continents and bag yourself a bargain. Number 4, when giving players contracts, make sure you give and set the appropriate squad status. And what I mean by this is if you've got a player coming in and he's not going to be getting much game time because you don't feel he's as good as some of your starters, for example, it's important that you set him as, say, a fringe player or a backup option. If you set him as a first team regular or key player in the team, but he's on the bench a lot of the time, that's where, as I mentioned in the intro, the players will be moaning and whining like 5-year-old children. It's really important that you set the appropriate squad status based on the amount of playing time you expect the player to be involved in, and this will lead to a much more harmonious squad and a better morale with each individual player. Cinco. Number 5, always keep your promises. Just like in real life, we shouldn't be breaking our promises. But on Football Manager, if we do that, the players will get really disgruntled and they'll probably want to leave your football club. If you've promised the player that they're going to get an increased salary by the end of the month and a better contract, then I'd probably do it. Otherwise, you're probably going to have a player that is wanting to be transfer listed or disrupting the nice harmonious mood that you've got within your squad. If it's a player you particularly want to keep as well, it's probably a good idea to keep him in your good books to get him firing and playing consistently well. So keep those promises. Tip number 6, try to involve all players in the squad. One of the key things I would say in achieving this is to try and have a close-knit group of players, but making sure that you have got a couple of players in each position. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you're involving all players so that they stay happy and they're content within the squad, but also so that the mood across the whole team is really good and everybody's sort of pulling for each other in a way that when you bring players in that have been on the bench, for example, they know exactly what they need to do, and they'll go out and perform like their lives depend on it. Sorry. Number 7, ask the director of football to recommend a signing. This is something that I didn't actually realise you could do on Football Manager 2022 on the Xbox until recently. But on my Nottingham Forest go, I had Eric Abidal, former Barcelona player, as my director of football, and there was times when I was struggling to think of a signing in a particular position, and I was just scrolling through the transfer tabs one day and I seen that you could ask the director of football to recommend a signing. I did so, and it sort of highlighted some players that I'd not really considered before, and I was able to bring one of those players in and plug a gap within the squad. So I think that's a really good thing to be able to do. If you're struggling to find anybody, it's always a good idea to ask that director of football, and they'll be able to give you a bit of insight and some players that they would recommend as well. Numero 8. Using tactics that fit the player attributes. This is a really key thing to consider, is the tactics that you use based on the attributes of your playing staff. And what I mean by this is, if you're going to deploy a gegenpress system, you really want to have players that have got high stamina attributes, determination, pace to go and close the ball down. On the other hand, if you've got players that are quite small, they've got high flair attributes and really good passing, for example, they might suit something more like a tick-attacker, whether it be vertical or normal conventional tick-attacker formation. So just something to bear in mind, but really consider the player attributes you've got. If you've got 2 pacey wingers and a big target man, you might want to play with wing play, for example, overload and get balls into the box and try and capitalise on the players you've got that way. But really think about your tactics and how it suits your current playing squad. Number 9, using the Bosman rule, if I think it's still called that, but when it gets to the January transfer window, checking out the players that contracts expire in 6 months' time to bag yourself a bargain. And it's not always guaranteed, sometimes you'll get a list of big clubs that are all going in and trying to offer that pre-contract agreement with a particular player. But on my recent Forest save, I did manage to get a world-class midfield player. I think it was from Lyon, and he literally was wanted by everybody, but he decided to accept my offer, and he's literally one of the best players in the game, and I didn't pay a penny for him. So yeah, always check out your contract ending in 6 months and try and bag yourself a bargain, as David Dickinson would say. Number 10, and last but not least, develop young players to help them reach their full potential. If you've got players coming through, it will give you an indication in terms of what potential they've got, particularly elite potential young players. What I'd recommend doing is either involving them in the squad as soon as possible, as soon as you think they're going to be able to perform at the required level. If that's not straight away, then send them out on loan to the highest calibre of team that you can, and that will help their attributes to grow and grow. And then it'll get to a point where you think, I don't really need to sign a player in this position now because I've got a ready-made player that I can bring in. And sometimes the attributes will go through the roof and you'll end up with a proper player on your hands. So always look to develop young players, and that will save you having to fork out on big transfer fees as well. So that's it, folks, my top 10 tips for Football Manager 2022 on the Xbox. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you can, subscribe to my channel, Red Dog Gamer. I'll be doing much more content in the coming weeks. So stay tuned and stay safe.